Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Swati Gupta and I'm doing my DMD from Boston University. In this video, I'm going to just give you an idea about how the ADEX Operative and Perio exam goes. Yes, first of all, I've cleared my exam. So I'll just let you know how the exam overall was, what was my experience like. If you want to have an idea about the endo exam, please go back to my previous video. And also, I'm going to make a video on endo obturation in the forthcoming days, and you definitely can look forward to obturation video. So, operative exam. So operative exam is not very hard, but definitely it is hard because a lot of people fail. And the reason people fail is because failure to identify caries or failure to identify when there was going to be a pulpal exposure, which is the basis, like the whole exam is about that. For this exam, you get almost like 7 hours for operative exam, and then you get 1 hour for perio. And you start with operative first. Okay, so how just the day goes is you go to the exam center by 6:30, and then by 8 or yeah, by 8, first thing is the diagnostic exam. So what's the diagnostic exam? They'll give you a printout of a radiograph, and they'll tell you to identify which tooth has caries, because that particular tooth is the one that you're actually going to be preparing. Okay, so in my case, it was the molar and a lateral incisor, and it's very easy to identify in the radiograph. But again, even if you by chance mistake and you write the wrong tooth or the wrong teeth, they'll give you a second chance. Okay, so then second chance, if it was not a molar and central lateral incisor, then it could be a premolar and a central incisor. So it's not that bad. Okay, so once you've identified, then they'll ask you, okay, are you ready to challenge? Are you ready to start? And it's up to you if you want to do a more, if you want to an anterior first or a posterior. I did an anterior tooth first. The reason being because it has less surfaces that need modification, and if I use my time carefully, then I can actually do it faster and then go proceed on to the posterior tooth. And because it requires more modifications, maybe pulpal exposure, so I just felt that it was easier to do and start with anterior tooth. So I started with the lateral incisor, and in my case the modifications were on the axial and the facial surface. Now there is one thing I really want to mention is that please just go through a manual. Okay, don't just listen to what someone says. It's really, really important to read the manual, understand what each surface is called, what's an axial surface, what's a facial surface. The reason you should be very clear about the terminology, because what happens is sometimes you're preparing a tooth, right? And then you found caries and you ask for a modification. Modification is usually asked when you prepare to the acceptable dimension. So when you read your manual, you'll see the criteria: acceptable depth. So when you're going to ask a modification, you have to ask you have to prepare the tooth to acceptable dimension first. Once you prepare to acceptable dimension and still you find caries, that's when you send it for modification, which means that I'm asking to prepare the tooth a little bit more, like 0.5 to 1 millimeter. Usually you ask 0.5 to 1 millimeter on a molar and a central, and then on a premolar and a lateral, 0.5 to 0.75. Again, it depends, because sometimes it's okay to even ask 0.5 to 1 millimeter on a premolar, because there's no way to judge 0.75. But our faculty told us that, okay, fine, for a premolar or lateral, ask 0.5 to 0.75, and then for molar and a central, ask for 0.5 to 1. Okay, so we asked for like 0.5 to 1. In my case, it was a molar. And even for a lateral incisor, we were told in the sessions before us, the people had given the exam, that 0.5 to 1 was considered acceptable. So you ask for modification wherever the caries is. Now, when you ask for caries, if you do not know what the surface is called, then obviously you're mentioning a wrong surface. So what happens is that your modification might get rejected, and you would think, oh, my modification got rejected because there might be no caries. No. So every time a modification gets rejected, don't just think that it got rejected because there was no caries, because that's not true. Okay, if you used your explorer and you felt the tug back, that is the whole definition of caries for this exam. A tug back is felt. If you still feel the tug back, then start thinking about the reason that a modification might have got rejected. It could be could be possible that you mentioned a wrong surface and they didn't find the caries on that surface, so they rejected your modification. Okay. Or another reason, very possible reason, is that you did not even prepare to the acceptable dimension. So that's why you have to go to the manual to see what is acceptable dimension, like 3 millimeters, axial, incisor-occlusal surface, or I mean less than 3. That means you do not go to complete 3, you go to less than 3. How much the distance from the adjacent tooth or from the DEJ. So those dimensions, if you do not prepare it to the acceptable, and so you have to be very sure of like I've been repeating this 100 times now, that understand why something can get rejected. Okay, so once you've established that, okay, my modification got rejected and this is the particular reason, I still have caries left, then you remove the caries, okay, and then you send it back and probably should get accepted. And this happened with someone in my Bay Area, so that's why I know that sometimes the modification gets rejected because you didn't prepare it to acceptable, but there was still caries. So then you remove the caries and it's still caries, you send it back. And please get that feel, like really prepare on those RTX teeth that you get, maybe in your school or on the website. You can get those RTX teeth to prepare. They have the proper caries. The caries, how that feels in those teeth is the same how that feels in the exam. So the feel of the caries is not going to be any different. Okay, so please practice on those teeth for sure. So after preparing my anterior tooth and doing the restoration, everything is fine. For restoration also, please make sure that you do not leave an open contact. And one of the very good ways to see if there's no open contact is not by floss, because this is not how they actually check. The faculty does not check that way. Now the faculty checks is under the light. Okay, so that means you have to check it under the light. Now you cannot take a model out and check it, right? So what I did was like use trans elimination. So you can, on one side of your model, like when it's mounted in the mouth, you can in the jaw, you can have the mouth mirror on one side, and then you can use like a curing light or maybe the light from your handpiece, and then see if the light goes through the open contact, that means it's an open contact. There is no question about it. But if the light does not go through the contact at all, okay, then you go through the floss, and if you hear the snap, that's perfect. But even if there's a tiny chance of that there's a light through the contact, then it means there's an open contact. But it's kind of tricky also in your in anteriors, because the contact is very minimal, it's very 1 point contact or something. So that is something, again, once you practice in your SLC or in your labs, that's when you'll understand that what kind of contact you are looking at. Okay, so yeah, once you're done with the anterior, then if they approve everything, and then they say, okay, proceed with the posterior. Also, please make sure, because this was one of the reasons, like someone failed in when I was giving my exam. It happened before also, that unless the examiner signs on your sheet. So when you see your sheet, the sheet they give you on which you write the modifications, you send it for approvals, on that sheet there is a blue colored box, okay, at the bottom. And that box, every time when your examiner, your Bay Area examiner comes and says, oh, okay, fine, approve, go ahead, or move to another tooth or move to another step, he has to sign in that blue box every time. If he has not signed on it and you proceeded, and then any point they come back and they check and they say, and they see, oh, that particular step is actually not signed by them, they'll ask you to redo it. No matter it was their mistake, that okay, they forgot to sign or something happened, but it will be on you. You have to redo the procedure, and sometimes there's no time. Like so the one of the fellows I was there in the Bay with, like they did the posterior, they prepped the tooth, they restored it, and then the examiner realized that there's no sign, and because there's no proof there, they're examining, they're seeing so many students there, so they're not even sure that they saw it or they might have seen it. I don't know. So they just told that person redo it, and when she was redoing it. She didn't have any time for the anterior, and you know, uh, she failed the anterior because there was no time. She was stuck with the posterior for so long. So there are certain things that you have to make sure you do not miss on, and that's the reason I'm telling that read the manual. The manual has everything mentioned, step by step, what will happen, who will come, who will tell you what to do, what is its surface. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember, this is just exam is just not about your skill to prepare. This exam is about assessing your skill to diagnose caries, to understand where all caries, what caries feels like here, and remove it completely, to make sure that if you see a pulpal blush that you're approaching the pulp. What is your critical decision there? Are you going to do indirect pulp cap? Are you going to do direct pulp cap? If there is caries left, and there is, you see a pulpal blush, what would you do? Would you still keep removing it and do a pulp exposure and then ask for pulp capping? But remember this, you always have to be under the acceptable number before you ask for a modification. Now, just one case scenario, that if I ask for a modification, okay, and I'm removing the caries. So I ask for 0.5 to 1 millimeter in the posterior. I'm removing the caries from facial, occlusal, all the surfaces, right? And then I have only asked for 1 millimeter. So I have 1 millimeter to actually go and remove the caries. Okay. Um, you do not have to use the whole 1 millimeter. You can literally be like 0.5 to 0.75, as much as number less than 1 millimeter to remove the caries. But let's assume that after going to the the limit that they approved, you still have caries, then you send for a modification. Like, like if it was 2 millimeters, you acceptable, you prepared. Now you want to, you have caries. You only gone to 2.5 and you say, oh, still caries, I will ask for modification. It will get rejected. And there are very good chances, if your modifications keep getting rejected, I think you're only allowed 2 to 3 major modifications except a rejection, because with each you lose 16 points. Okay, so don't, be very clear, read the manual, everything is mentioned. Don't take it for granted that I heard from this person, on what grounds I can lose or I can fail. You have to know the manual, how you can fail, what is the acceptable dimension, when do you ask for modification. If I see a pulpal blush, what am I going to do? Direct pulp cap, indirect pulp cap, how to do a direct pulp cap. So you just dab on the area where there's pulp exposure. You don't put calcium hydroxide on every area on the surface, right? Only on the area where there is pulpal exposure. You have to do it in front of them and send it for approval again. And then you, when you're done with the posterior, once it gets approved, then they'll tell you, okay, fine, move ahead with perio. And for perio, they'll mention the surfaces that need removal of the calculus. Okay, they'll mention like 27 mesial, 28 lingual. Doesn't mean other surfaces don't have caries, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is for the surfaces they've given you, for the teeth they've given you. So remove the calculus from those surfaces. And one technique I was using in the exam, that when I was done, I was using, like, when you blow air, and then little bit of gingiva reflex from the tooth surface, so it's easy for you to see, and then you can remove more if at all it is left. So that was one of the good ways to identify if there's any calculus left, even after you using your 11, 1, 10, 23 explorer to probe and to explore if there's any calculus left. Okay, so but I think major thing in perio, don't leave calculus. Please don't really underestimate the exam. It's like people do fail in perio also, that they've left the calculus. So you have to remove calculus. You have to feel how it feels like. It's like chalky white powdery calculus. So one thing is you can even see, but definitely you can't see through the tooth, the gums. So you can feel it, and it comes out easily. You just have to feel it. Okay, it's not difficult to feel. It's, and with the air, when you, once you know, after 2 3 strokes, the gingiva becomes a bit loose, so you can easily see. Okay, I hope I've given you an idea of how the exam goes. If you have any doubts, leave me a message here and I'll try to answer whatever I can or redirect you to manual. I hope you have a good exam, and I'll see you again with my another video. Okay, bye bye.